Today is Friday, April 2nd, 2021, which means it's Derelict Friday. Hello, fiendlings, how the hell are ya? Yesterday was April Fool's Day, and I had an idea for what I thought was a pretty good troll. The idea was to have dramatic lettering, Paul E. Cooley's The Black, Extinction, ominously appearing on the screen with various effects, epic horror movie music in the background, and a slow fade to the book preview portion. It was just going to be a black screen with the sound of bacon frying for a couple of minutes. The end of the video would have the date of publication listed as 2021-ish. The idea was brilliant. Alas, I thought it cruel and unusual punishment for all involved, including myself, so I chose to instead give you the description. But be warned, I might do something like that one of these days. It could happen. Right now, though, the Black Extinction is far from completion, and I don't even want to entertain a real date. So instead, let's get back to Black Company. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 18 of Derelict, Trident. Chapter 29. Dunn felt like screaming, but not in fear. No, this was a good old-fashioned rage, and it felt damned good. He and Oakes were the only two aboard, apart from the casualties and their sleeping guests. Dunn could rip his larynx out in a steel-crushing scream, and no one but Black would even know. He took in a deep breath, closed his eyes, and allowed his exhale to take as long as it wanted.
"Captain,"
Black asked.
"do you need a sedative?"
"Shut up," he growled. Ever since Kelly Moore's squad found empty crates in Blue Hangar, especially ones that contained nukes, he'd been poring over Trident Station schematics. Now that they'd found crates of radioactive material around the hangars, his brain had seemed to freeze. What the fuck was the trio doing? If not them, what the fuck was Colonel Hayes doing? Did he know about these munitions welded to the hangars? And if he didn't, how the void did they get there? The trio didn't have automatons to carry out orders. Did they? That thought gave him a shiver. The trio had access to every printer on the station, presumably those in the shipyards as well, assuming any of those were still active. To his knowledge, they hadn't been used in more than 4 decades. Exterior maintenance was always handled by the SFN grunts, and it was fairly rare the station even required a magwalk aside from inspections. Every frame from their cameras was captured and analyzed during the inspection process, so the engineering staff could properly track damage rates to the atmosteel, as well as radiation absorption, the occasional O2 or pressure leak, and the like. "Cam feeds," he said aloud. "I wish we had some void-damned cam feeds."
"Captain, to which cam feeds are you referring?"
He glared at the ceiling. "Any of them! Hangars, decks!" He stood from the chair and ground his teeth, eyes sparkling with anger. "We don't know a void-damned thing that happened here. We don't know a thing about what's going on." He placed his hands on the edge of the holotable and closed his eyes. Dunn chuckled nervously. He really had nearly smashed his fists into the holotable. For the first time since becoming captain of S&R Black, he was on the verge of coming apart. If Gunny were there, he'd be impassive, but his eyes would be fierce. "So what are you going to do about it, sir?" He could practically hear the Marine's voice, and a brief smile touched his lips. That was the question. What could be done?
"Noble to Dunn."
Dunn nodded slowly to himself. "Go ahead."
"Sir, what do you want to do? The ship is going to be on emergency reserves real soon. Once that happens, I'll be lucky if I can print half a skiff before we power down to save life support."
Life support. Trident Station was effectively dead. No heat, no pressure, no air. They couldn't hide here forever, and without fuel, they were dead. There'd be no redoubt, nowhere to rearm, and nowhere to get fresh oxygen. Oxygen. "Noble, I'm sending you the schematics for the O2 emergency stations. Get someone to check if they're powered. Meanwhile, I think you better get ready to take a trip into the tunnels." Dunn wasn't sure, but he thought he heard a gulp of concern.
"Aye, sir, we're on it."
Dunn out. 2 O2 stations per hangar. Every station had a portable generator primed by mechanical motion. In other words, A jar head wound the crank until there was enough juice to get it started. The cells lasted a long time, and if the generator ran out of energy, all you had to do was prime it again. Generators. O2 generators. Black, have we ever seen what fire does to our friends from outside Sol system?
No, Captain. I have no data regarding their interaction with actual oxygen combustion.
He sighed deeply. Was afraid you'd say that.
Why do you ask, Captain?
He shook his head with an embarrassed smile. Just wondering what else we can use as weapons. Black was silent for a moment, but he barely noticed. He was too busy switching to the tunnel schematics. He didn't want his Marines down there if he could help it. They could send in several probes, but it would take precious time to scan all the areas. And without meticulous... Dunn smiled again, white teeth peering over his lips. Black, want to drive some probes? He heard a smile in her voice.
Of course, Captain.
Noble had given Calimora the orders, and she had carried them out. Dickerson and Carbonaro had walked to the O2 stations, checked them out, and found both of them unpowered. Dunn had asked if the O2 stations still had power, because if they did, it meant that the hangar's power system was corrupted, but power was still available from somewhere. Instead, the hangar was completely dead apart from the emergency lights glaring down from the ceiling.
Captain, no joy on the O2 stations.
Figured as much, Dunn said. They're still functional?
Aye, sir. No worries there.
Noble, I want 2 nanoprobes ready to go into the tunnels. Black will run them.
Aye, sir.
The words stumbled out of Noble's mouth after a brief pause. With a low growl, he connected to Noble via block. Spill it. Sir, how can we trust Black to run the probes if she doesn't even trust her own telemetry? Do you have a better idea? What's Oakes doing? Why not get him to bird dog the probes with Black? Maybe he'll see something if she doesn't. Dunn's engineer was being practical, logical, cautious. But there was more to it than that, and Dunn knew it. Noble had lost trust in her, in all sentient AIs. The fact that Black admitted she'd been tampered with, that she had no G protocols, and that she'd influenced the events at Mira proved little. But there was something there. Dunn wasn't sure he could trust Black, but with the trio down, she was their only link to the automated facilities on the station. If you can get them back up, he reminded himself. Assuming they managed to bring up the trio, he'd have to trust her. He sure as shit couldn't trust the very sentience that had sent them to Mira, not to mention what they'd done to the crew of Mira. What was the saying? The devil you know? Black wasn't an option. She was the only option. Still, Noble was right. Oakes had to shadow her when it came to sensor readings and analysis. That also meant Oakes would have to remain with the ship. Agreed. He did his best to keep the thought flat and emotionless, but he felt Noble flinch slightly through the connection. Get those probes ready. Aye, sir. Dunn connected to Oakes via Black. Noble's sending in probes. You and Black fly them. If her readings deviate from yours, shout out over Block. Aye, sir. Oakes' reply held a hint of confusion. Dunn's lips twitched as he tried not to smile. Not that Oakes could see it, but it felt unprofessional. We'll use Block comms from now on for information directly related to Black. Understood? Aye, sir. Coordinate with Noble over regular comms. Copy. Oakes didn't seem confused now. The thoughts were clear and uncolored. He switched to general comms. Marines. He opened his mouth to speak and stopped. What the void could he say that didn't sound patronizing? He cleared his throat and continued. We have to get power. Lieutenant Noble has your orders. Good hunting. You could have said something a little more morale-boosting, a voice said in his mind. He could have. Void he wanted to. An acidic burp burned at the back of his throat. He cleared the hollow display with an annoyed swipe. With his hands on the edge of the conference table, he leaned forward and stretched. He felt as though his day had begun by arriving at Pluto and it had never ended. 12 days in stasis wasn't the same thing as a good night's sleep, and it sure as void didn't give you any time to get perspective. He couldn't imagine what it was like for Calimora, Dickerson, and Carbonaro. Quite soon, maybe mere minutes from now, he'd send them back into their meat grinder. All of them. He just hoped they'd all make it out again, intact. Talby didn't like what he saw, not one damned bit. The upper personnel decks were rife with radiation. Not lethal levels, but high enough to account for dozens of the life forms, maybe hundreds. Shut up, he told himself. There were hundreds of them in there, they would have already attacked, wouldn't they? Not if they don't know you're here. Maybe they don't. His frown deepened. Or maybe, he said aloud, they have a reason to stay inside. Something about that tickled the back of his brain, but he couldn't quite grasp it. Inside. What were they doing in there? What had they been doing on S&R Red apart from nesting, breeding? While they finished their journey to Trident Station, he'd reviewed Callimore's squad's cam feeds from their trip to Red. He'd seen the damaged stasis pods. Someone had tried to hide in one, but the creatures got in anyway. But where had the bodies been? They had no evidence to prove the creatures consumed anything apart from light. If they were attracted to humans, it might have something to do with radiation, something that leaked through combat suits, ships, and any other substance humanity knew of. Somehow, they knew where there was life.